Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening again, everyone. Just a quick reminder to please keep your phone muted when you aren't speaking to minimize background noise and echoes. Thank you. So this evening, we're going to start with approval of minutes. Oh, see, I started right. Never mind. We're going to start with roll call.
Ms. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Abadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here. Now I would like to make a motion for the approval of minutes for our special meeting and executive session dated April 14th, 2020, and for our regular meeting and executive session dated April 28th, 2020. Mrs. Neary, can I please have a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Mrs. Sugars. Sorry. Slow down.
You were in a rhythm.
I was in a rhythm. I was skipping stuff.
I'm ready to go.
All right, I am opening up the online voting so board members can cast their votes. Oh. Mrs. Tong, are you having trouble? Oh, there you go. Okay. We have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Malash. We have some board recognition this evening.
We do. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So I'm very excited to recognize our student board reps from this academic year. Just trying to get the right spot on the agenda. So they are online tonight watching. As we do every year, we have a board rep and an alternate from both of our comprehensive high schools. So 2 students from High School East and 2 students from High School West. So I'm very excited this evening to recognize first our alternates to the Board of Education from High School West, Jack Begley. Congratulations, Jack. And I have here, I'm going to hold them up as I do the introductions, are the plaques. I will have the plaques delivered to the students' homes later this week. So Jack, thank you for your service, for the time that you spent coming to the board meetings and sharing information about what was going on at High School West. The board alternate, the East alternate student representative is Kartik Pejavara. Kartik? Kartik, again, congratulations and thank you for your service to the board. I appreciate the time that you spent coming here. Even times when both of you as alternates, even if you weren't necessarily sitting at the board table, that you were here at the meeting to be involved. Your involvement in reporting out on the schools and keeping your peers informed is incredibly important. And then the 2 student reps from the high schools. First, from High School East, Jacob Groff. Jacob was the student board rep this year from High School East. Again, shared a great deal of information, was always willing to share his perspective and jumped in from the very beginning last spring to be involved. And from High School West, Maria Musa. I do have to say, unfortunately, Maria, they spelled your last name incorrectly, so we are having a new plaque made. As soon as we get that delivered, again, I will have it delivered to your house. Again, Maria, thank you for your time as the student board rep from High School West and for all of the information that you shared on behalf of the other students. Later on in the meeting, I will have an opportunity to read their final statements and report outs. And we are going to have, we also get to recognize tonight our new student reps. We'll talk about in a minute. For those in the community that are watching, student board rep is perhaps one of the most important positions that a senior in high school can hold in Cherry Hill, because they literally become the voice of the student body. Not only do they report out on what's going on at High School East and High School West, but the opportunity to talk about what's going on in the middle schools and the elementary schools. And for the board members, it gives a true perspective, an authentic voice about what's going on in our schools. And I think that's honestly one of the most critical things, one of the most important things that the Board of Education does, is take into consideration what our students feel, what they think, and how they want to impact the education in Cherry Hill. So thank you again. One last round of applause for all four of them. Thank you to each of them.
Thank you.
And now I'm excited to recognize the new representatives. And when we are able to be in person, we will actually swear them in. Again, these students go through a rigorous process at both of the high schools through application and interviews, preparing information in order to be selected as the board representative and as the alternate representative to the board. So first, from High School East, the board representative is going to be Naomi Barakatab, who will be a senior this year at High School East. Congratulations, Naomi. The alternate representative from Cherry Hill East is Aubrey Demerjian. Congratulations, Aubrey. The student board rep from High School East is going to be, from High School West is going to be Nathan Kong. Congratulations, Nathan. And the student alternate representative from High School West is going to be Alex Turley. Congratulations, Alex. So again, we look forward to all four of you having the opportunity to be here in person when we have the opportunity to have all of our board members back in person, which I'm very excited for, hopefully soon or as soon as we can, and we will swear you in at that time. Thank you for your interest and for your willingness to represent the school communities. Mrs. Wilson will be in touch. I will be in touch at some point over the next couple of weeks about the June board cycle. So thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing the new reps in person, and thank you for your service to our outgoing student reps. Next, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash, one of you, to kick off our long-awaited presentations this evening.
Yes, and I'm actually going to just find, I have a couple of presentations. So there we are. Not the right thing. That's just us again. I apologize. All right. So first this evening, Mrs. Seidel, we have a couple of presentations, one from the Alternative Funding Committee and one from the Safety and Security Committee. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the background of both of these committees. We are able, and hopefully it has worked out okay, but we are able to have some of the community members who participated on the committees join us this evening. So these two committees, and there's a little bit of history on the first part of the page for each of them. That's what people are looking at online right now. The Alternative Funding Committee was created as recommended by the Ad Hoc Committee, which was formed in response to the district's failed bond referendum in December of 2018. The Ad Hoc Committee recommended the creation of two specific small working groups to address the safety and security work and alternative funding work in the district. The Alternative Funding Committee members were selected to provide representation of the Cherry Hill community. And then let me just tell you a little bit about the members of the committee. We had 3 members of the community who participated. First, Mr. Douglas Klein. Second, Mrs. Brooke Shostak. And third, Ms. Miriam Stern. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Doug Klein, and this, when we set it up, we put out a call for people to be involved. Folks had to submit a letter and a resume and tell us why they wanted to be involved in the committee. Doug Klein is a certified public accountant. He currently works with Bayada Home Health. He's audited both private and nonprofit organizations as a child in the school district. Brooke Shostak was major gift officer for the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia. Spent many years working with the Education Foundation on their signature fundraiser, Dancing with the Cherry Hill Stars, and she has 2 children in the district. And finally, Miriam Stern, who's a successful local business owner, Meridian Counseling Services. She's been a member of the Fair Funding Committee and a strong voice to advocate for fair funding in Cherry Hill. And she's been a board member of the Jewish Family and Children Services. She also has children in the district. Very grateful to these 3 individuals for their willingness to represent the community on this committee. We also had students that participated in the committee from High School East, Jake Brooks and Kristen Eng. From High School West, Olivia Hafner and Javion Saunders. From the Cherry Hill Education Foundation, the chair, Ms. Eleanor Stoffman. Lori Deach from the Fair Funding for Cherry Hills Public Schools group. Kareem Augustini, who represented Zone PTA. Linda Weiss, who's a teacher at Thomas Paine Elementary School, who represented the Cherry Hill Education Association. Mrs. Neary, our board vice president, and Mrs. Schultz, one of our board members. And then from from the administrative group, Mrs. Sugars and I sat on the committee. Mr. Barrow, who's the the athletic director for the district. Mrs. Ridgeway, who's the assistant business administrator and the assistant board secretary. And Mrs. Singh, who's an assistant principal at Beck Middle School. Those were the members of the committee. So honestly, a very well represented group and all who are willing to share their voices. So when we go through the actual document and after the board meeting tonight, we will post this on our website. This is the information that the committee has recommended to the board. So it says the Alternative Funding Committee submits the following recommendations to the Cherry Hill Board of Education for their consideration as plans are developed for an upcoming bond referendum and as they explore alternative funding options. So discussions took place on 4 nights during the course of the academic year. And during that time, about 6 weeks in between each one of the meetings, there was additional information that went back and forth and some tremendous information that was shared. Our lights just blinked.
Mm-hmm. I thought maybe it was just me.
No, that's right. That was actually, yeah, the lights blinked here. So the, oh, let me find it, sorry. There we are. We're still sharing? Yeah. Not quite sure where that was. And I apologize for my large fingers on this little keypad. All right, here we are. So the recommendations. I want a little build up for everybody as I try to navigate this. Pursue a parallel path of bond referendum development and public-private partnerships, P3 opportunities. For the bond referendum development, continue to develop the bond referendum with short, middle, and long-term goals. Show the steps taken and the vision for the future. Tie the recently developed strategic planning goals into referendum development. P3, public-private partnerships are opportunities. There was a law that was passed in New Jersey in April of 2018. We unfortunately are still awaiting the regulations to be developed. To pursue additional information from experts that have developed P3 arrangements with other entities or in other states. We have a couple of people in the community who are willing to set up meetings and to meet with us. Develop a timeline and steps for exploration. define pros and cons. The second key area, establish 2 full-time positions, a grant writer and an alternative funding manager. For the grant writer to research grant opportunities for the district and to develop competitive grant applications, and an alternative funding manager to establish corporate partners, focus on local industries, healthcare, car dealerships, banking institutions, somebody to, quote, be the face of the district in alternative funding pursuits, to develop relationships, to maintain databases, to promote naming right opportunities, to pursue endowments, to create, quote, buckets of interest, such as Mount Misery, athletics, drama, or music for sponsorships, to manage collection of alumni information, to manage capital campaigns with a focus on alumni. Both of these positions need to be full-time in order to be effective. Deliverables and goals should be established. However, these positions should not be commission-based. And then the third recommendation, establish community-based task forces to support facilities and alternative funding. These task forces would consist of community members who are experts in their field and would support and deploy the work of the grant writer and alternative funding manager by establishing contacts and volunteering assistance based on their field of work. The fourth recommendation, communicate consistently with the community concerning district funding issues and concerns, alternative revenue efforts, and the bond referendum. The committee recommends that the district provide consistent communication that clearly outlines the district's funding issues and alternative revenue pursuits and efforts. Communication concerning the bond referendum needs to begin early, and the focus should be on building needs. Community input on the proposed projects needs to be solicited. So those are the 4 recommendations from the committee. And again, I believe we have a couple of the committee members who have joined us this evening. Mrs. Shostak, or Ms. Shostak, are you available? Brooke? Ms. Stern, are you available? Miriam?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I know Mrs. Shostak I'm on the phone. She's on the Google Meets, but she said there's no chat function. I'm not sure how she's going to be able to speak, but I know she would like an opportunity. So I just want to throw that out there, but I'll take the opportunity now, and perhaps Mrs. Shostak should call in the way I've called in, because I couldn't get on the Meet either. So through Microsoft, I don't know why, but it wasn't working. So anyway, thank you for giving us a chance to be part of the committee and for the opportunity to speak. You know, I think the resounding experience on the committee was that we even breaking up into small groups and coming back together with all the different participants, everyone really came to the same conclusions, which I think is a really important thing to note here, that this is definitely an alignment from those of us who represent, or we're lucky enough to be chosen to represent the parents in the community, as well as the representatives who work for the district and as the students as well. You know, the fact that we all came to the same conclusions, and the board members that were there, I think it was pretty powerful. And I think we all recognize just what a devastating impact the district has experienced with the severe underfunding that we've experienced for the past 10 years. And the fact that we really have to work hard to, in a big way, kind of play catch up to really address the issues that financial issues that we're facing that are multifaceted. And also that none of our financial shortcomings, whether they impacted our, you know, the terrible needs of our building repairs, being, you know, behind in our having, you know, kind of the 21st century learning, the resources we need to provide that, and as well as, you know, making sure that we have an equitable education for all of our students. That none of those resources are going to come from one source. They're not going to come from the state funding that we're getting, which obviously is increasing, but now since this shutdown and the impact on the state, we're all very concerned, and that was addressed. That we did have one meeting during the shutdown, and we all expressed kind of an uncertainty about how that's going to impact the district. And we assume it will have an impact in terms of the fair funding. So bottom line is, now more than ever, we really have to be creative about how we're going to source funds for the needs that we have. It cannot be one source. It can't just be a bond. It can't just be the state budget. So although we all feel that those are important areas to pursue, we also thought it was very important to have a strong establishment of 2 full-time positions, 2 employed people whose commitment is to work for this district and work hard for this district, and to be the leaders in developing grant opportunities and experienced people, very experienced grant writer who understands on the local, state, and national level what kind of grant opportunities are out there for education, and someone who's experienced and going to pursue them. As well as an overall alternative funding manager, someone who can manage a team of both staff and volunteers, community members, develop relationships, because that's what finding funding is about, is really someone who understands how to develop those relationships and look for those opportunities. We really need someone to be at the helm of that. And I have to say that was a resounding agreement from the entire group. It's a special talent. It's a special skill. It probably does not come cheap. These people are skilled and experienced, but what they can bring to the position, those types of positions, will pay for themselves, hopefully again and again and again. We can see that our district is at a great disadvantage financially from not having a grant writer for all these years. And, many years ago, the grant writer did exist in the district, but wasn't successful. But we were in a very different funding situation then. Now we see neighboring districts winning huge grants, wonderful grants for really important things. We don't have that. We need that. And then as far as the alternative funding, there are many ways that entities, including government entities, are now funding, and even some school districts now are funding big projects. And when I mean big projects, complete rebuilds of schools or new buildings of schools. So, and one of the ways that was brought is through the public-private partnerships. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of information that our committee received, in-depth information about public-private partnerships, but there are community members, actually Cherry Hill residents who are very experienced with public-private partnerships, who are actually spearheading public-private partnerships in our own backyard for other organizations. And I know that there's specifically one person who's more than happy to have a meeting with the district, have a meeting with the board, and talk further. So that was our discussion in our committee, that the board, hopefully the board will adopt these recommendations and support the district to move forward, and then to start to explore public-private partnerships as perhaps a way to completely fund rebuilding or even perhaps new buildings, if that makes sense, for some of our schools. And then the other piece, I guess I'm just touching on a bunch of them. I know Brooke had texted me and asked me to, just say hello to everybody. She would love to contribute.
Wait, I'm gonna call her in too, Ms. Stern. I have her number, so I'm gonna call.
Great. Okay, so I'll maybe leave the discussion from Brooke. Brooke just texted me that as well. Okay, Brooke, I'm just gonna leave it to you to talk about then, the fundraising piece, more a little bit specifically about what a grant person can do and a funding person can do regarding developing relationships to raise funds from organizations to support specific things, so specific types of projects. And I just want to say, we also, many of us on the committee would like to see an ongoing task force that is a kind of a continuation of this, the initial work that involves different stakeholders to be part of moving together, perhaps under the auspices of the leadership of perhaps an alternative funding manager, that there's ongoing work groups or task force that are can help support the work that we know is just, this is just too much work for administration, for, you know, for let's say the teachers, let's say for the board. This has to be, you know, there's a lot of human resources that are in our community that can be tapped into for this, and people are excited about this. So, you know, just in conclusion, this is just a personal follow-up that I want to say. You know, I think even for more than before, the fact that we know we're probably going to again look at some funding cuts that are going to happen statewide, we have to really commit ourselves, in my opinion, to funding these critical two positions. I think they'll be more than worth their you know, cost to the district, and that's just my opinion, because I think if we don't do this now, we are just losing ground again, which we've already lost ground. And you know, I know that it's been put into the budget for next year, the idea of a contractor grant writer, but that person is not committed, would not be committed fully to our district, and wouldn't necessarily have the access to understanding the full needs of the district. And you know, I would really like to see a full commitment to these types of positions that are being recommended by creating positions that and hopefully they'll be able to quickly help show their value and bring value to the budget for the district. So that's my piece. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you,
Thank you.
I'm going to call in Ms. Shostak.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Shostak, it's Joe Malash.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you for your patience. So I have you on, you're on speaker so that the folks out in the board meeting world.
Got it. Okay, so I
Yes.
was listening to the thing, so I guess there's a delay.
Yes, yeah, there is.
So yeah, so Miriam went into detail, so I don't need to repeat what she said, but just, you know, I'm a professional fundraiser, as you mentioned, and so I guess I come at it with my, you know, my own nonprofit fundraising hat, and I agree. I think that when we convened this committee, none of us had any idea what this COVID-19 would bring, and I do think that more than ever we need, you know, we need dedicated staff to do the fundraising, because we're just not going to get it from the state. And I do think it's a burden that volunteers, as well as, you know, teachers and administrators can't do, and that isn't their job. So, you know, I am not an expert grant writer. That's one type of skill set, you know, really looking and seeing where are the grants and how do you apply. And oftentimes grants are very long and requires a tremendous amount of research. And so that's sort of one skill set. You know, I'm of more of the skill set of the actual going out, building relationships, meeting with people, and engaging with the community to support the schools, to meet with people who have an understanding of the public-private partnerships. And look what other districts have done, you know, within New Jersey, but also beyond our state that we can look at as models. So it's just two very different skill sets. I definitely think there could be measurable goals for both of those, but I do just sort of reiterate hearing that, you know, what the budget from the governor is going to look like, and it's just going to gut public schools. I just think more than ever we need to double down on making sure that we have, you know, it's like a catch-22. On one hand, we might not have the money to pay for it, but if we don't pay for some positions, then where are we? Our problems aren't going to go away. They're just going to build on themselves. And we know that we have structural issues as well as programmatic. And I said this to Dr. Malash, and I'll say it here publicly, I'm happy to stay involved on a committee level, perhaps on a professional level at some point, but I'm happy I'd like to stay involved. I think it's important to be, part of this conversation as a parent in the district and, resident of Cherry Hill. But I hope the board really sees that the importance of the paid positions, that it's really the way forward, and that hopefully the community will be able to get on board with it as well.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Shostak. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we going to do questions in between, or should we save them until?
It's up to you.
Okay, so I think it would probably be better to do them now,
Sure.
While they're fresh in everybody's mind. So I will start with Ms. Schultz. Do you have any questions for the Alternative Funding Committee?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Goodwin. Mr. Goodwin, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to him. Mrs. Matlack?
I don't have any questions at this time, but I thank the community members and the students and all the representatives who spent the time on this committee and gave us their thoughtful feedback on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Tong?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
No, I don't have any questions, but I really do appreciate the report out, and I look forward to reviewing some more of that information in detail.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Yes, thank you. I want to reiterate the thanks from before. I think, civic engagement like this is critical as we look to do, frankly, quite a lot of things in a short period of time as a school district. Couple ideas, couple just reaction thoughts, questions. The P3 model, which as I understand it, and I'm not an expert, I don't pretend to be, but as I understand it, that has to do with new construction. It has to do with folks owning buildings, us leasing, maybe over a period of time with a buyout at the end. Very interesting stuff. But I think there's also a go, no go from our own perspective. 10 months from now, we have to be prepared with our bond items, so to speak. And at that point, it's obvious, or it seems to me likely that a P3 in a large scale would be a no-go. What are our processes in place to get expertise in the interim, knowing that the book has not yet been written on this in terms of implementation? How do we get good expertise quickly from sources that perhaps could implement such a thing? On the other side, with the 2 full-time positions, I think I heard our first community member who talked about where we are for next year as kind of a pilot, but something that proves out a grant writer and what could be around. The idea, I think the recommendation of the committee is a more robust position in the future, but we do need, I think, some assessment in terms of what's possible to do some of that goal setting. But I think the direction we are currently is a good half step, perhaps not the full. My other question is for the alt funding manager. When I think of the face of the district, I think of Dr. Malash. To what extent are we helping or hurting by running this out of the district? What are our degrees of allowances in terms of straight fundraising? / is this something the Ed Foundation perhaps could evolve into as a standalone, but as a supporter? Are some of the questions I have around that. And then in terms of the task force continuing, I think it is a great idea. And I like the idea of having people to continue to engage on this line of thinking, which, takes expertise that's different than necessarily what we have around the table all the time because we're educating students. So I think it's a good idea to have a continuity plan with this group and perhaps to invite others as well. Again, I really appreciate this work, and I think there's a lot of positive direction to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Ms. Friedel?
Hi, again, I'd like to thank everybody for their work and their summary. We truly appreciate it. A couple of questions, I guess, more global than for the committee, but with the proposed or the approved grant writer that we discussed for the upcoming budget, I'm not sure if they are going to be working a set number of hours a week, or if this is going to be, we found this grant, we want you to write it. So I'm not sure what the consultative model is, because I think that has a different dynamic if they are going to be certain hours a week versus here and there. I also was wondering if we can get a cost comparison of what a consultant would cost versus a district employee, because I know from past experience, consultants for writing just one grant can be very costly. That's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary?
I had no questions, just wanted to thank everybody. The committee did a great job and everybody was really engaged and provided tremendous feedback, as we heard from Brooke and Miriam tonight. So I did want to thank them. I think Kim raised a great point on the grant writer. So, but I have no additional questions.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back to see if Mr. Goodwin has any questions.
I don't have any questions. I do want to just reiterate what everyone else is saying. This was a lot of great work, and I really appreciate the efforts. I guess I am kind of curious, like, at what point in time are we, as a board, going to be taking up those recommendations? Would it be for this budget year, or have we thought about that yet?
So that's a discussion for the board to have.
Right.
So next step for the board, y'all as a group are receiving the recommendations tonight. Y'all received them the other night, some discussion tonight, and then it'll be in committee again on June the 1st at strategic planning for additional discussion and talk about next steps from there. I'm going to assume that it will probably impact the board goals for 2020, 2021. If there are specific discussions about, hiring or creation of positions, we can certainly, can go into the HR committee for additional discussion.
Would alternate funding recommendations also fall under BNF as well?
They would. So it really could go under, any that we can list on all 4 of the committees.
I might be
to see.
It might be wise to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on the discussion.
We can put them on the June 1st agendas.
Okay, and I just want to echo my colleagues' sentiments. Thank you so much for everyone's involvement on the committee. Great recommendations come forth out of it. I personally really appreciated the differentiation between the 2 positions that you recommended. I hadn't really thought of it in terms of that it's a separate skill set for those different positions. So that was an interesting concept for me to think about. I also am interested in hearing more about potential P3 opportunities. I know that there's not a lot of information out there. I don't know if, it's possible to be the person to sort of write the rules as we go, since there aren't any out there. It's certainly something we could explore. And I also, like Mr. Avadia, wonder how we can leverage the Ed Foundation for some of this. So again, thank you so much. Any last questions from board members? Okay, Mr. Sugars or Dr. Melange, anything to add?
I think I appreciate Miriam and Brooke and their part and their comments. I think you guys kind of covered all that was there. I'm looking forward to the ongoing discussions for sure about where we are and about what needs to come next. These are discussions that have to continue to take place, So thank you to everyone that participated.
Thank you.
And next we are going to go through and take a look at the recommendations for the Safety and Security Committee. Let's see if I can't get the right one on. All right. And I believe we have on the line with us three of the community members, and I'll go through and introduce the people that are on the committee in just a moment. But Mr. Tim McGeady, Mr. Joel Mayer, and Dr. Karen Wolf. Gentlemen, are you on with us this evening?
I'm here. This is Karen Wolf.
Dr. Wolf, how are you? Joel or Tim, are you on? All right, so Karen, I'm going to go through and just introduce this a little bit, and then I will ask you, as we did with Brooke and with Miriam for the other committee, just to share some perspective. So the Safety and Security Committee was also formed back in the fall. There's a similar introduction at the top of this page, going through the historical piece, referring to the ad hoc committee that met last year after the failed referendum in December of 2018. Similarly, the Safety and Security Committee members were selected to provide a representation of the Cherry Hill community. In a minute, I'm going to go through and tell you who was on that committee, both the community members and the members from the district. This committee also met 4 times, although the first time was a little bit different in that we had a blue ribbon panel of folks from across the state and our own community in a community forum in October that met at High School West. The committee members all attended that meeting, and then we had 3 additional meetings. Something that was significant as we went through our discussions was that the impact of COVID-19 absolutely impacted the recommendations of this committee and the thought process and what people talked about and what the recommendations are. So again, I'm incredibly grateful to the people who were on this committee. So let me just tell you the members of the committee. We had 3 community members, Mr. Joel Mayer, Mr. Tim McGeady, and Dr. Karen Wolf. 4 student members, 2 from High School East and 2 from High School West. From High School West, we had Madison Giorgenti and Kaya Struther. And then from High School East, Deborah Goldberg and Tyler Seaman. Representing the Zone PTA, Donzetta Thomas. Representing the Cherry Hill Education Association, a teacher from Beck Middle School, Ms. Felice Levecki. Board of Education members, Carol Matlack and Lisa Seidel, our board president. From administration, Mrs. Sugars and I again, Mr. John Cohen, who's the principal at Woodcrest Elementary School, and who also has his undergrad degree in criminal justice, and Mr. Anthony Safarito, who is our district director of security and a retired member of the Cherry Hill Police Department. Let me tell you a little bit about the community members and why they were selected. They also applied to be on the committee. Mr. Tim McGeady, Tim has worked with the Cherry Hill Fire Department for the past 25 years, and he currently serves as a battalion chief and shift commander at the fire department. He has an incredible skill set and a different perspective and skill set than from people who work within the school district. He also has 3 children in the district, a tremendous addition. Mr. Joel Mayer, Joel is the founder of Bell Rock Compliance, LLC. He's also former assistant prosecutor for 11 years in Atlantic County and the former chief compliance officer for the Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. He has 3 children in the district as well. And again, an incredible skill set and a different background from what folks in the district bring. And then Dr. Karen Wolf. Karen is assistant professor of law at Stockton University. He has an academic focus on school safety, security, and discipline. He's published many articles, including ones that focus on the roles of police in schools and their effect on school communities and different schools' approaches to school safety, security, and discipline. He has both a law degree, a JD, and a PhD, and he also has 2 children in the school district. So let me go through and tell you what the recommendations from the Safety and Security Committee are. So for safety and security practices, first, provide more communication about current district safety and security practices. Develop a communication plan that conveys district security practices and procedures that are already in place. Describe to the extent possible how and why the district is building upon those practices and procedures to enhance overall security. Include in the communication plan the roles and relationships of various groups involved in daily district security, including but not limited to the campus police, the district counselors, the Cherry Hill Police Department, and the Cherry Hill Fire Department. Encourage principals to communicate reminders of daily practices and procedures. Use Blackboard strategically to provide updates. Review student entrance and exit procedures, particularly at the secondary schools. Safety and security physical enhancements. Educate the community on the advantages of the security suite, and in particular, security vestibules. Provide the evidence-based research used by the state of New Jersey supporting the recommendation for security vestibules. Use testimonials from district administration and staff that currently have the security suite in their school buildings on benefits of these enhancements, including how security vestibules have streamlined security measures, and upgrade the district's current keying system. We get this. I'm telling you, I'm getting better. Community engagement. Provide opportunities for public and staff input. Solicit community input on question formation for the bond referendum. Provide information on so the public understands what they are voting for. Survey staff for feedback on security measures. Establish bi-monthly informal opportunities for discussion of safety and security issues and concerns. And under health and safety, during the course of this committee's scheduled meetings, health safety has come to the forefront as the world deals with the COVID-19 pandemic. Keep the community informed of State of New Jersey and Department of Health requirements for when the reopening of schools is permitted. Communicate how the district will comply with mandates and enhance health safety moving forward. Continue to communicate various health issues and general health safety recommendation to parents and staff. So those are the recommendations of the District Safety and Security Committee. Dr. Wolf, did you want to share some perspective on your experience being on the committee?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for inviting me to take part in this meeting. And it was a real pleasure working with everybody on this committee. It was a great group of people who really thought very carefully about all these things. I think from reading recommendations, I think you can get the sense that one of the biggest things that came out of everybody was the need for clear communication, because safety and security is a very emotional issue. It's also a very complicated issue, and also can be a very costly issue. You know, the district could end up spending a lot of money upgrading its security. So the idea that the committee had was that really the people who are members of this community need to really have a good understanding of, first of all, what security features and safety protocol the district already has in place. And that should be on an ongoing basis throughout the school year. So while it might be said at the, before school opens each year, it should be sort of something that's reminded on a regular basis. But then also, as we sort of look forward to the bond referendum that's coming up, approving a lot of spending on security upgrades, the community really needs to understand what those security upgrades are, how the security suite builds upon what already exists in the schools, the sort of plan for implementing the new security suite if approved. All that's really just necessary because people who are voting on this need to really understand what they're voting for. I think one of the issues the first time through with the bond referendum is it was such a complicated issue and involved so much money that people, I think, had a hard time really knowing what they were voting for one way or the other. And so I think, again, going back to this issue of communication, I think it will put sort of the emotional concerns at ease. It will put some of the financial thoughts at ease, and also overall just make the community feel more informed about exactly what Cherry Hill School District is doing to keep students safe. So I think that's what the community, the board members, the committee members really talked about quite a bit, that need for communication, and also that the plan that Cherry Hill right now generally has in place, it's reasonable. It's not spending more money than it needs to on security, but it's also making serious upgrades in terms of ensuring safety at school and looking at safety from a very broad perspective. It's much more than just trying to protect against things like an active shooter, but it's making sure that students are safe, minute by minute, hour by hour in the school from a variety of things that can threaten their health and well-being. And so that's I guess that's the big takeaways I got from attending all the meetings and working with everybody.
Great, thank you, Dr. Wolf. Mr. Mayor or Mr. McGeady, are you guys on? If you are on and you're unable to speak or you can hear and you have something you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to email me and I can certainly call you in if necessary.
I just wanted to, this is Karen again. I had to call
Sure.
in order to be able to speak. The web link for some reason didn't offer a speaking option, so I called in
Okay.
and that's what worked. So maybe that hint to them will help them call in and be able to speak.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay. Well, I will start to go around the table, and then if they are able to call in, then we can jump over to that. So first I want to say, Dr. Wolf, thank you for your summary and for your participation. I had the honor of being part of this committee, so I'm very appreciative of the work of the committee. I'll start with Mrs. Matlack. You are on the committee as well. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank the committee members. Having sat on the committee and heard the thoughtful discussion and the varying opinions and thoughts, and then the consensus that came from the members of the committee was heartening. To have that kind of engagement from our community members. So I just want to thank them for their participation.
Thank you. Mrs. Tong, any questions or comments?
No, not for me. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Neary?
I guess I have one question, and just like to again reiterate my thanks to the entire committee that came out and spent their time to give the feedback and understand this a bit further. I guess my one question would be, as we mentioned COVID-19, are we taking a look at that now and adjusting any recommendations in light of that? In light of those changes?
So the way that we left it in committee was we sort of added additional info. We didn't change any recommendations that had been sort of fleshed out before COVID-19 hit. We just felt it was critical to make sure that we take a look at the health safety component. It was a piece that we hadn't talked in depth about until COVID-19 hit. So if anything, it added a recommendation to make sure that we incorporate that into our overall safety and security plan going forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Friedel?
Sorry, no questions, but thank you very much to the committee for your work and your recommendations. I look forward to talking with the board about the report further.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
I don't have any questions, but just thank you for the thoughtfulness in the reporting.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
Once again, I want to reiterate what's already been said. That was a very thorough report. I really appreciate all the time and effort that's went into it. So I don't know if it's even possible, but kind of what was one of the recommendations are like reiterating some of the safety and security things that we have in place as a district, and really trying to make sure we get that message out to folks. One thing I would love to see, if it's possible, is that safety and security meeting kickoff with the panel of experts and everything that was there. I thought was really good. I really wish more people in the community could have participated in that. And I don't know if that's something that we can plan in the next year or so, but that I think it would be very helpful, especially if we can get more people in the community to come out to something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Mr. Avadia?
Yes, I thank everyone in the committee for their time, attention, the concise recommendations. Just a couple sort of brief comments here. I think there's a little bit in this particular issue of safety, a rub between popularity and explaining. And just as part of this, I went back to some of the recommendations statewide around vestibules, because they do appear a few times in these recommendations. Regardless of their popularity, they are the recommended by experts. And I think there's sort of a rub sometimes between expertise and, everyone's an expert on safety sometimes because everyone has to go out of their house, but there's sort of an extra layer of expertise. And I appreciate that this committee brought that level of expertise here, you know, to tell us, you know, when Dr. Wolf says that there are serious upgrades and that they've been good while being fiscally responsible, you know, that has a lot of meaning to me. So I appreciate everybody's work and, you know, getting to this level of expertise so we can make good decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. And Mrs. Arroyo.
I don't have any questions, but I'm really excited about some of the recommendations, and I look forward to reviewing them with the rest of the board.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Dr. Wolf, and everybody who served on both committees. Great, great work. Thank you very much. Next, we will move into correspondence, and I'll just go around the room and see if anybody has anything to share this week. Mrs. Neary, any correspondence?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Friedel?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Avadia?
None for me, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
None, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Schultz?
None, thank you.
And Mrs. Tong?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Malash, who is going to read the student representative reports this evening.
Yes, and thank you, Mrs. Seidel. And these are reports that were presented to us by the outgoing student board reps. So first from Jacob Graf from Cherry Hill East, his final BOE report, and it's dated May 26, 2020. We plan for virtual graduation on June 16th at the moment, even though the governor announced today he was going to allow in-person graduation starting in July. Crimson the Tiger, I'm just reading. Crimson the Tiger visited many neighborhoods around Cherry Hill to take photos with students from their houses to bring some East community back into their lives. East Side continues to work on the final June issue, which should be out in about 1 week from today, give or take, with a full superlative page, a college decision list, senior perspectives, and much more. East parents received and installed signs on their yards praising Cherry Hill's amazing educators during this crisis, along with East graduate signs as well. Jostens has announced a virtual yearbook signing through their company that allows classmates, faculty, friends, and family to sign whoever's yearbook they're allowed to sign. Cherry Hill East Cum Laude Society just recently had its virtual commencement ceremony. More honors societies, such as the Social Studies Honor Society, plan on hosting an online ceremony as well. Cherry Hill East Activities plans to have a senior week starting in June, starting off with Mr. East, which will be held online on June 1st. Teachers, advisors have sent out postcards to seniors who they have enjoyed having in class. AP testing just concluded, and while some students had technical issues uploading work, teachers have made themselves available to help students figure out their issues. Students had their parents decorate their front doors with some of their achievements, memories, and photos from their 4 years at East, which were then sent to activities and posted. I will be attending Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, and Kartik will be attending Duke University. Please thank the whole board from me and Kartik for making our experience invaluable and on the whole, quite enjoyable as well. So that's from Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob and Kartik. And now the Cherry Hill West board report. Students continue to work on their online work, and the staff has been very understanding and have not hesitated to help students. AP students have completed their exams as of last Friday, and we would like to congratulate all the students on all their hard work, and a huge thank you to the teachers who have adapted to the unusual circumstances and helped us to succeed. The Principals Committee continues to meet Dr. Morton and discusses what is happening in the West community and ways we could adjust senior year activities that normally take place. The senior class is very thankful for the effort that is being put in to help make our senior year the best it can be. Hall of Fame voting has concluded, and semifinalists have submitted applications for review. The Executive Committee of the National Honor Society also continues to meet with their advisors through Google Meet. Jack and I would like to say thank you so much to the board, and we are happy to have experienced this, and we will miss you guys very much next year. I'll be attending Rowan University in the fall of 2020 with a major in biology with a concentration in pre-med. Jack will be attending Seton Hall with a major in sports management. From Maria Musa and Jack Begley.
Thank you.
Congratulations to all 4 of you, fine students.
Congratulations and thank you. So we are going to move into our first public comment opportunity. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment is for agenda items only, and we'll have another public comment later for any topic. As we've done for the past couple of weeks now, we've asked you to submit your questions or comments in writing to lshugars@chclc.org, and Ms. Sugar is going to read what we've received so far.
I have
No items.
No
Okay.
items.
All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Malash for the superintendent's comments.
Mrs. Seidel, I'm usually a man of few words. This is really kind of putting the pressure on to continue to talk. So I do have some brief comments, and again, I'll keep it brief. First, again, as the board said, I would like to thank everyone who participated on both the Alternative Funding Committee and the Safety and Security Committee, making a commitment to spend those hours, and during the course of the 4 meetings, it was hours to spend with us, is incredibly valuable. And means so much to us as a school district, to the staff members, to the families who are not able to attend things like that, and ultimately to the students. The people that participated in the committee brought their life experiences to the recommendations that were made to the board. I too am excited to continue those discussions with the board members and to get more in depth as we continue on into June and then on into the 2020-2021 academic year. I hope that everybody had some rest during the course of the Memorial Day weekend. And again, I hope that everybody took some time yesterday just to remember on the true meaning of Memorial Day. It is a holiday that's dedicated to those who gave their lives in service to our country. So incredibly grateful. Cherry Hill has many folks in our community, who have served in the military. We have current family members who are serving in the military, and we have a group of students who are graduating from our high schools this year who will go in to serve in our military. So always grateful to everyone in our community who serves and to the family members who support the servicemen and women. Today, the governor did make an announcement this morning prior to his daily briefing that he will allow graduations to be held outdoors beginning on July the 6th. He has promised that tomorrow there'll be guidelines about what those graduations will look like or what we can do in terms of bringing people together. We're always hopeful that those things all come together at the same time. They have not. So we will look forward tomorrow to see what those guidelines look like. As of tonight, we are set for an outside and an in-person graduation on August the 6th. On our website, and I know Mrs. Wilson pushed it back out through our social media, and I did a quick minute today. I did a letter to the community on May the 8th that talked about graduation, and we would be holding a virtual ceremony on June the 16th. We will still hold a virtual ceremony on June the 16th. That is in full production mode right now. Speeches are being recorded this Friday, and that will still take place. We need to confer the diplomas to our students in June. We do have students, as I said, who are leaving to go into the military. They need to have their diploma, when they leave. We have students that are going to early college programs for a variety of reasons. They too need to have their diplomas conferred prior to July the 1st. Once the guidelines from the governor's office and Department of Ed come out about what graduations can look like, then we'll take a look and see if we have any other options. We will have those discussions. No other discussions have taken place at this point. We will have those discussions and we will share that information with the community as quickly as we possibly can. There will be discussion tomorrow involving the high school administration and the activities advisors and Dr. Smith, about what it looks like, for both the virtual ceremony and an in-person ceremony. And we will continue to do that. As we've said all along, we're committed to celebrating this class of 2020. The middle school principals will also be talking about, what it looks like to have an opportunity to bring students together at some point during the summer. I don't know that we will try to schedule some sort of graduation for the middle schools. They too will have virtual graduation ceremonies that will be aired on June the 15th. That is all in pre-production as well. So I'm excited about those things taking place. We are also talking about what does it look like for the 2020-2021 academic year. I'm sitting on a county committee who's then feeding information to the state. We're hopeful that there will be additional state guidelines. One of the things that I continue to caution people with as we have these discussions is, 3 months ago, back in February, we were all in school. We were talking about what might happen if we had to be closed for 2 weeks. And now we've been closed for more than 2 months, and are finishing out this academic year. 2020-2021 academic year won't start for more than 3 months from today. A lot is going to change in those 3 months. And we are working on what will that look like. There are no concrete answers about what it will look like for us in the fall. The health and safety and well-being of our students and staff will always remain the most important thing in terms of what we are talking about. If we are in some situation next year where we're continuing with remote learning opportunities, that will continue to evolve. That will look different than it has this spring. It all will continue to evolve. But the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff is always going to be our primary focus and of primary importance in terms of what we are doing. Like I say, as we have information that's available, we will continue to push that out and share it with the community. We've been engaged in a thought exchange with our staff since late last week, which will end tomorrow. Later this week, we will invite the community to participate in this thought exchange. We've had a discussion with the board about thought exchange, and it is more of a moderated discussion, where we can put a question out to the community and folks can weigh in, folks can share comments, they can share thoughts, they can rate other comments and thoughts. And we will put that out later this week, and I'm very excited about getting that information. One, because it provides a tremendous amount of analytics that we can look at about how often do themes come up, what does it look like, what are people talking about, what are people thinking about. So look for that later this week as well. So I'm very excited about this piece. And again, I continue to be incredibly grateful for the staff, all of our staff, and what they have done. The instructional staff, the support staff, the therapists, the librarians, the nurses, the secretaries, the principals, and the way that they have continued to engage, our students and families. It's not an ideal situation. If we were to sit and spend a number of years to plan out what would ideal remote learning look like, it would not be what we have right now. But again, I'm incredibly grateful to our staff in the district for what they have done, since late in February when we started to talk about this becoming a reality. The second piece, I'm incredibly thankful to the families, to our community members, and especially to our students for allowing these remote learning opportunities and this distance learning to be successful. Again, not ideal for anyone, but everybody has shown the support and provided the support that has been needed for this to continue to work. So I'm very thankful for all of that. We are coming to the end of the academic year. There's a lot of things that will continue to happen. There are some formal things that will happen with the board as we move into June and we finish up with the finalization of our goals and board goals, and we start to talk in June about the building of board goals for the 2020-2021 academic year. Because even though September seems like it's going to be a long way from here and it's warmer today and finally feels like spring, September is going to come very quickly for all of us. So everybody, please continue to stay healthy. Please continue to find the guidelines, and please make sure you pay attention to the information that we are pushing out. We'll continue to send it out to the families through Blackboard. We'll use our website. We'll continue sharing it through our social media channels.
Thank you, Dr. Malash.
Yes, ma'am.
So we are about to move into our organization agenda. And before I read this very long list,
yes.
Dr. Malash, did you want to just, for the community members' benefit, give a few words about what we're going to be covering tonight?
I do. So in a school district, we operate on 2 different years. We operate on a calendar year and we operate on our fiscal year. So our calendar year, as everybody's calendar year, begins in January and our fiscal year begins in July. There's a traditional piece about the organization with school districts that goes back to when school budgets were voted on in April and school board members were elected in April. The organization of the school district always traditionally took place in May, which then also matched up with our fiscal year, which begins in July. When the laws changed more than a decade ago And it went from the school budget being voted on every year to as long as it stayed within the 2% cap, did not need to be voted on. And school board member elections were then moved to November in the general election. We then also had an organization meeting in January in order to seat the new board members that came through and to elect a board president and vice president, as well as do some other things. So that's why we have an organization agenda that takes place in May. There are a lot of things that are on here that are traditional that take place every year. There are a lot of appointments. One of the most interesting things that I think you often find is about other duties that are assigned. You see a number of additional responsibilities that Mrs. Sugars has, or that Mrs. Wethington has, that Mr. Saporito, or Mr. McCarty. Everybody, these are formal titles and responsibilities that they have within their jobs that come through. A couple of highlights and things that people often ask about that are in here. One of the things that goes through, Mrs. Sugars, this is where we go through the bank accounts, right? In here, where we have about signatures on bank accounts and about petty cash. There is petty cash that gets assigned to all of our schools. 2 of our schools have additional petty cash, Thomas Paine Elementary School and High School West, because additional programs that we have for special needs students that are there. That's why they show up more than once that are on there. That covers all of the big pieces.
Okay, great. So with that, the superintendent recommends and I move the approval of appointments. All appointments will be for the term commencing July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, unless otherwise stated. Number 1, board secretary, assistant board secretary. Number 2, treasurer of school monies. Number 3, purchasing agent. Number 4, ratification of paid bills and budget transfers. Number 5, custodian of records. Number 6, public agency compliance officer. Number 7, designation of superintendent. Number 8, approve payment of bills between board meetings. Number 9, affirmative action officer. Number 10, Title IX officer. Number 11, Section 504 officer, ADA officer. Number 12, substance awareness coordinator. Number 13, homeless liaison. Number 14, indoor air quality program certifier. Number 15, asbestos management and New Jersey PEOSH officer coordinator. Number 16, integrated pest management coordinator and IPM plan. Number 17, right to know officer. Number 18, school safety specialist. Number 19, resiliency officer. Number 20, healthcare insurance portability and accountability act officer, also known as HIPAA. 21, chemical hygiene officer. Number 22, tax shelter annuity companies and disability insurance companies. Number 23, Omni Group 403B, TPA, and 457B. Number 24, architect of record. Number 25, auditor. Number 26, bond counsel. Number 27, insurance broker of record. Number 28, solicitor. Number 29, resolution awarding an extraordinary unspecifiable services contract for continuing disclosure agent services and independent registered municipal advisor. Number 30, resolution authorizing a professional service agreement for the provision of environmental services. 31, resolution approving school physician. Mrs. Neary, can I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you. Mrs. Sugars. Oh, we're just going to go through all of them first?
No, I just wanted to point out one thing. I just wanted to recognize the BNF committee for their hard work in doing lots of interviews this year. One of the board goals was to put out our professional services for proposals. And so I just want to thank them for all their hard work. It was a big task to get through, especially in this environment, to get through some of that. And they asked some really great questions. And, we're pleased to have these some new and some of our former providers on the agenda tonight for approval.
Great, thank you. Before we call for the vote, let me just see if anybody has any questions really quickly. So I'll go around the room. Mrs. Neary?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Friedel?
None, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thanks.
Okay. Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
And Mrs. Tong?
No, thank you, Lisa.
Okay. Mrs. Sugars? Over to you.
I'm going to open up the online voting so that everybody can put their votes in. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great. Thank you.
Switch it back. I'll keep it up until it changes.
Okay. Next, the superintendent recommends and I move the following: approval of reaffirmation of policies, actions, rules, and regulations. Item 1, policies. Item 2, reaffirmation of policies, actions, rules, and regulations. Ms. Friedel, can I have a second, please?
I second.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia, any questions?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
And Ms. Friedel, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Sugars?
Okay, I'm going to open up the online voting. Mrs. Arroyo, are you having difficult? Oh, there you go. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. Do you want to? Sure. Yep. Okay.
Good.
Okay. The superintendent recommends and I move the following: approval of resolution, educational services. Number 1, Camden County Educational Services Commission. Mr. Avadia, can I have a second?
So seconded.
Thank you. Before I turn it to questions, Dr. Malash wanted to give an overview.
Yeah, so I just wanted to remind folks, the Camden County Educational Services Commission, we are a member district to this Ed Services Commission. It offers a lot of opportunity for us working with the commission. Primarily, they do a lot of the work for us that involves the non-public schools. You know, as a school district in New Jersey, we receive funds from the state or from the federal government that then goes to the state, that then comes here, that then we must manage for private schools. You know, where our children, Cherry Hill children, attend. So the Ed Services Commission, as you see on this approval, manages all of those different pieces that go through.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Arroyo, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Avadia?
None, thank you.
Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I'm going to open up the online voting. We have a unanimous vote.
Okay. The superintendent recommends and I move the following: approval of bank accounts and bank signatories. Number 1, approval of bank accounts and bank signatories. Mrs. Arroyo, can I have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz,
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong,
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Avadia,
No questions, thank you.
and Mrs. Arroyo, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars, back to you.
Okay, I opened up the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following: approval of tax receipt schedule 2020-2021. Item 1, approval of tax receipt schedule 2020-2021 school year. Mrs. Matlack, can I have a second?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz,
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong,
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary,
None, thank you.
Ms. Friedel,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Avadia,
The one question I have based on last meeting is, so I see there's a double payment in July, I assume because of the potential tax deferral. If there are future tax deferrals, we've talked to the township about doing a similar split in the future.
Well, we've had, we typically do a split. This is not new. We typically do a split payment in July because it's usually they're waiting for their August tax collections. So that's not anything new. We are having ongoing conversations with the township. We have a bi-weekly meeting set up. They're also arranging for a larger meeting with the fire districts and the county for all of us to get together and have a discussion about what it looks like going forward. We meet with them again on June 2nd, which is the day after the deadline for taxes. So we'll have hopefully a good idea of what things look like at that point. And I think, again, as I said last time, the key is just going to be communication, keeping, what our needs are, what their needs are. I think I had mentioned that June is a very big month for us because we have back-to-back payrolls. We're closing out our fiscal year. We're trying to get bills paid off. July is a very big month for them because they have some debt payments that they have to make. So just keeping those lines of communication open right now. Our tax schedule may not look like what we have here, because of some constraints that they may experience, but I think as long as we work together, get through it the best we can.
thank you. Mr. Avadia, does
Thank
that
you.
answer your question? Okay, great.
Yes,
Ms.
yes, thank you very much.
Mrs. Arroyo, any questions?
No, thank you.
And Mrs. Matlack, did you have any questions?
No, I don't, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Mrs. Sugars.
All right, so I open the online voting. And we have unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into our action agenda and we'll start with curriculum and instruction. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. Number 2, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2020-2021 school year. Number 3, approval of Family Friendly Centers grant renewal for the 2020-2021 school year. Mrs. Matlack, can I have a second?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin, any questions?
No questions for me.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
Has there been any guidance in the event that when schools reopen, they do not reopen as we know it today? Will we get the funding in full, or has there not been any guidance yet?
Ms. Friedel, the funding for the grant funding or?
Yes, I'm sorry, for the family-friendly centers.
No, they have not. We haven't heard anything from the state yet about any monies.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Thank you, Ms. Friedel. Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thanks.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Okay, and Mrs. Matlack, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I'm going to open up the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, we will move into business and facilities. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, financial reports. Number 2, resolution for the award of bids. Number 3, resolution for the award of transportation. Number 4, resolution extending telecommunications services contract between Cherry Hill Board of Education and Comcast Cable Communications Management LLC. Number 5, resolution for the award of contract renewals. Number 6, resolution for participation in Edge Market Cooperative Pricing System. Number 7, resolution authorizing the use of cooperative pricing agreements. Number 8, resolution for approval of contract with prescription insurance provider. And number 9, resolution for approval of contract with Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. Mrs. Schultz, can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash, did you want to say anything about our involvement in some of the cooperative pricing agreements?
Yes. So when you look at 21.6 and 21.7, these both identify where we take tremendous advantage of better pricing because we're involved in these cooperative pricing agreements, both through the Edge Market, and then you can see specific and individual ones, some of which are based in New Jersey and some of which are national. And it goes through this whole list. It provides cost savings for us and is more efficient for us in terms of purchasing for the school district, especially our size. We run into challenges because we are so large with the bid threshold. So being involved in these agreements allows us to make direct purchases rather than going out for a bid every time we want to purchase something. I don't know, Ms. Sugars, if there's any.
Yeah, we try to belong to as many as we can just for the ease of purchasing. Again, as Dr. Malash said, everything is cumulative for the year. So if we buy 50 widgets in September and 50 widgets in December and then buy more, it accumulates for the year. So we're always very cognizant of using these cooperative purchasing agreements to make sure that we're not going up against those our quote threshold is $6,000, which means we have to get 2 quotes for our purchases. And our bid limit is $40,000. So if we purchase any one particular item that goes over $40,000, we have to go through a bid process. There are some exceptions to that, but so we have to be very careful about that. And again, because of our size, we are, coming up against those thresholds rather quickly every year.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mrs. Tong, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
My only question, and maybe this has to do with next year, but not knowing, as Dr. Malash said, what fall looks like, is there some rule of thumb around transportation and what we do from a negotiation standpoint, or is our current advice sort of to keep on as we are?
I think we need to keep on as we are. I think we have to make sure we have these contracts in place because, the longer we wait to put these things out to bid, I think, and again, we don't know what it's going to look like, but if we wait, we run the risk of not getting competitive pricing or not getting bids at all. And with the current status of some bus companies, I've heard rumors of, companies going out of business and things like that. We felt it was prudent to move ahead, have this in place. If in fact we're not busing in the fall, we'll have to have a different conversation of what that looks like. But I think it's important that we move ahead and lock these contracts in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Arroyo,
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
No questions, thank you.
and Mrs. Schultz, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Sugars.
All right, I'm going to open the online voting for these items, and then I'm going to run through the list because I know sometimes with our BNF items, we have people that need to abstain. So if you need to abstain on a particular item, I will run through that list. So right now we have a unanimous vote on these items, and I'm going to run through real quick just to make sure that there isn't any particular items anybody needs to abstain on. Mrs. Arroyo.
No, thank you.
Ms. Friedel.
No, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin.
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack.
No abstentions, thank you.
Mrs. Neary.
None for me, thank you.
Mr. Avadia.
No abstentions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz.
None, thank you.
Mrs. Tong.
Nope, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel.
No, thank you. Okay. Next, we will move into human resources. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leaves of absence certificated. Number 6, leaves of absence non-certificated. Number 7, other compensation certificated. Number 8, first reading of revised policy. Number 9, first reading of new policy. Mrs. Tong, do I have a second?
Second, yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary, any questions?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Friedel?
No, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thanks.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
None, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
None, thank you.
Okay, and Mrs. Tong, do you have any questions?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sugars?
All right, I've opened up the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. Now we will move into P&L. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, first reading of policies. Number 2, approval of the continuity of learning plan. Mrs. Neary, do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Sure. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash for a moment to give a little overview.
So just a reminder and an update on the agenda tonight is the approval of the continuity of learning plan. The continuity of learning plan is what was provided. It's on our website. It's something that we as a school district had to develop based on the guidance from the Department of Education. It's allowed us to deliver remote instruction and remote learning opportunities for our students. It's been effective and in effect since Monday, March the 16th. It's been updated a couple of times. We received direction from the Department of Ed that it needed to now be adopted by the board. It's been resubmitted to the state as it was resubmitted last week. So we're asking the board to adopt it tonight. It is a living document. After the board adopts tonight's iteration, it will be updated on the district website, with the information that's there. This will stay on there until we are back in a typical situation with what school looks like. I expect it will continue to evolve and continue to develop during the course of the summer. I do not expect that we will bring it back to the board to be voted on every time. It's just not necessary or a function of what the board does. Because of the formality, the Department of Ed has asked us to have it adopted.
Okay. Ms. Friedel, any questions?
Yes, Dr. Malash, my question would be, so we are adopting this, and I understand that, you know, everything moved very quickly. Will there be discussion within the district administration about reflecting on the positives and the challenges, and if the need were to happen again next year, let's hope not, would there be potentially changes to this plan to, you know, strengthen the remote instruction? And would you also be getting family feedback, you know, parent feedback as well?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Friedel. So the discussions are ongoing for sure within the district. You know, one of the advantages is, you know, we're in a community that folks typically aren't shy with sharing their perspective or their opinion. So we do receive feedback quite regularly in an informal way. We have started 2 different formal committees. One is a return to work committee that's being chaired by Mr. Bart, by Don Bart, the Director of Operations, and Ms. Adrian, Nancy Adrian is the Director of Human Resources, meeting with representatives, staff representatives from throughout the district at every level and from every part of the organization about what does health, safety, and security look like for people to return to work. And then there's a return to school committee that Dr. Mahan is chairing. And then she has co-chairs to represent elementary and lower childhood, to represent the middle schools, to represent the high schools, and then fleshed out with staff members from across those different levels, as well as therapists and nurses and that kind of thing, to talk about what do remote learning opportunities look like. And again, if we should be in this situation again, what does that mean, and what do we need to do in order to continue to evolve the delivery of instruction? Later this week, I believe on Thursday, we're going to launch a thought exchange in the community that's asking, you know, that basically asks people about, you know, what do you feel comfortable, what will you need to feel comfortable with returning to school, and kind of launches those discussions. We'll continue those discussions to also include, you know, discussions about remote learning, but to get, you know, kind of a wider swath of information that comes from people throughout the community.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
No questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
This may have been already stated, but I'm just curious, has the governor set a date for whether or not there's going to be approval for us to have classes in the fall, or is that going to be at a local level or state level, or has anything been mentioned on that?
It's a good question, Mr. Govan. As of right now, he has not set a date. So right now, his executive order that effectively closed all schools is still in effect. So schools have to remain closed until he lifts that executive order. I don't believe that there's anything that we can do at a local level in terms of formally starting school until that executive order is no longer in place. You know, again, there are discussions going on at each level. You know, there's a number of us from Cherry Hill that have participated in county discussions that then feed into the state level discussion about what reopening of school looks like, at least reopening of the school buildings, right? Because school is still in session, so we're still open as a district. But I believe that we have to wait until the executive order changes. And Paul, I don't know whether there's anything on your end.
No, it's you're absolutely right. We're still waiting for word on that, and we really don't expect to hear anything much before July.
Thanks.
So when you say you're talking about what would people feel safe to go back to school, that's based on the assumption that the mayor will, I mean not the mayor, but the governor will open up the schools. Yes.
Well, that's just in our planning, right? You know, in our planning, we need to be prepared because September 1st is going to come. You know, the 2020-2021 academic year is going to be here. So we need to be prepared to deliver instruction in the way that we can be most effective, that also fits within the guidelines and the laws of what we are currently allowed to do, you know, at that time. Okay. But as Mr. Green says, you know, we wouldn't expect really anything until July, hopefully in July, that there'll be some sort of inkling But as fast as information changes and decisions are made, I wouldn't expect really any discussion about it until then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Mrs. Neary, do you have any questions?
None, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars?
Okay, we're going to open up the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. We do not have any items to vote on tonight for strategic planning. And we did speak earlier and get the recommendations of the alternative funding and the safety and security committees. Did we want to have a discussion about what the summer months might look like in terms of our strategic planning? I'm assuming there'll be goal work.
We certainly can, yes. And I can provide a little update on where we are. So at the June 9th Board of Education meeting, so at the work session, we will have members of the Student Wellness Goal Committee, the Purpose and Passion Goal Committee, and the Connecting Beyond Our Classrooms Goal Committee will present to the board the action plan that they've been working on developing over the course of the last couple of months. And again, incredibly grateful to the folks who have given of their time, the staff members who have given of their time to participate in these subcommittees. So as we've talked about a number of times, on January 14th and 15th, we had more than 20 people participate for 2 full days here in the boardroom at Malberg, to work and break down all of the information that Judy Wilson put together for us that she got from the community about what was important in terms of strategic planning and where we were headed as a school district. That then allowed the board to adopt in February of this year, of 2020, strategic goals that will be in effect from 2020 through 2025. And these are the 3 goals: building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency. We will, first one under student wellness is create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for emotional and social wellness. Under purpose and passion, develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. And under connecting beyond our classrooms, provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. So as we go into June, at each of our committee meetings, we'll be talking about the board goals for 2020, 2021. We'll spend, quite a bit of time in the strategic planning committee after we have our last building report out, right? Because Ms. Sugars, we saw High School East will be reporting on June the 1st. We'll spend some time talking about these goals as well, but then leading into the work about what's going to take place in 2020, 2021. That discussion will continue on into July as we start to flesh out the goals a bit deeper. Ideally, those goals will be adopted at the action meeting at the end of July, and if not, then early in August, so that we're prepared for the opening of school in September of 2020.
Thank you.
Sorry. Myself all choked up over those strategic planning goals.
Are July or August scheduled as committee of the whole meetings?
July's committee of the whole again.
Which timing works out well, because we had said we wanted to make sure some of the strategic planning discussion was in a committee of the whole format.
It's in some ways the ideal time for us to have that, because we are fresh in talking about all of the goals. Prior to the board meeting on I believe it's July 14th, is that Tuesday evening. I'll check momentarily, but I believe it's July 14th. You will have drafts of goals in your hands to discuss to come out of June.
Okay. Okay. Mrs. Neary, do you have any questions?
It is July 14th. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought so.
None right now. I mean, we expect, actually, wait, maybe I do. We expect that we'll be able to, it'll be presented in June, and then we'll review it again at the committee of the whole, and then vote in August, or have the vote in July. I just want to make sure I'm following that timeline.
So the presentation from the subcommittees or the goals, Mrs. Neer?
The goals, are we gonna, so we have the presentation from the subcommittees in June.
Yes.
And then the goals we'll review in July, vote in August?
Yeah, so you'll get a draft of the goals prior to the committee of the whole meeting. Ideally, we'll have robust discussion during the committee of the whole about what's contained within the goals, in terms of targets and information. If there are changes, we'll make changes and then discuss them again at the action meeting on the 28th of July. Same thing, if there are changes that need to be made, then we'll carry it over into August. If not, then we will have them adopted. It's always ideal for us to adopt them by the end of the work session in August, because the district goals are what help to guide the goals for each one of the buildings as the buildings are preparing their goals. And again, ideally, those goals are done prior to the staff returning to school so that everybody can be welcomed back in the same way with the same targets.
And just to make sure that it's clear, we'll also have an opportunity to discuss the subcommittee recommendations at June 9th when we read out from the strategic planning committee.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Yep. And at June 23rd.
Correct.
Because there won't be anything voted on in the strategic plan.
Did that answer your question, Mrs. Neary?
It did, thank you. I just want to make sure I was following that. It's harder virtually, so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
And Mrs. Tong?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we will now move into our second public comment section. This is the public comment section where you can comment or speak on any item. If you would like to still send a question or comment, you have a few minutes to send to lshugars@chclc.org. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sugars to read any comments that may have been received.
I have not received any.
No comment. Okay. I can't ask you if you have anything to respond to.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Since we don't have anything to respond to, did you perhaps want to just go through what the end of the year looks like? I know that you put out a lot of communication. I know, for example, in my house, my daughter read some of the communications as there's no school after May 29th, and I had her reread the communication. So I was wondering, other parents might have similar confusion in their household.
Yes, so there's been information sent out, I believe, from all of the schools. Each of the principals has sent out to their school community about what the end of the academic year looks like. Our last day of school is going to be Tuesday, June the 16th. In fact, when we have our committee meetings in June and then at the work session, we're gonna ask the board to formally change the calendar. If you recall, we were supposed to have an in-service day on Monday, April the 13th, which was the Monday after spring break. We had a regular day of instruction that day through the remote instruction and held on to that in-service day in the hopes that we would still be returning in person to the school buildings. Because we did not use that in-service day, we were going to move that in-service day to Wednesday, June the 17th. Each one of the schools has sent out about when new assignments will cease to be distributed or sent out by the teachers. And also what a final date in terms of making up work. Everybody can continue making up work. Everybody can continue improving their grades, improving their performance, about when that will be accepted as well. So I encourage all parents to make sure you check your emails. If you have specific questions about assignments, and I heard from some students over the weekend and from a couple of parents, please make sure you contact the teacher and then the building principal first. I really have no handle on what's going on with individual assignments, and I will always refer back to the buildings. School continues. The check-ins with staff continue. The information that's being shared continues, to go through. School is not ending this week, so don't let any of your children tell you that school is over on Friday. It is not over on Friday. School continues until June the 16th, and there will be information activities that will come out from each one of the classrooms. As I said, we're having virtual graduation ceremonies for our middle schools. They're in production right now. That'll be on June the 15th. There'll be virtual graduation ceremonies that'll be broadcast for our high schools on June the 16th. Those are in production right now as well. The elementary principals have been working together for a virtual program for the 5th grade students. There are still activities that are coming up. Please, again, make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on and the information that's coming out from the schools directly to the families. One group that I did not thank, I don't think earlier, are the PTAs. Thank you to the PTA parents and all that they have been doing to keep children involved, whether it's in a virtual sense, whether it's taking things to homes, all of that kind of thing. I'm incredibly grateful to the PTAs. And just a little plug for our meal program. We continue our meal distributions. Our traditional days are Mondays and Wednesdays. On Mondays, it's 2 breakfasts and 2 lunches. On Wednesdays, it's 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches. We served 5 meals last Wednesday because we were closed yesterday. Meal distribution will pick up again tomorrow at Cherry Hill East, Cherry Hill West, and Barton Elementary School from 10 a.m. until noon. Everybody will receive 3 lunches and 3 breakfasts, as well as meals that go along. Last Wednesday, we distributed meals to 1,352 children, which is the largest number that we've distributed thus far. And one other highlight is we will continue our meal distribution program throughout the summer. So that will continue throughout the summer, that we will do meal distribution. Additional details about where we will certainly send out, later in June, but that will continue as well.
Great.
So
thank you.
Good questions.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And I will ask Mrs. Neary, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Avadia, can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Night.
Good night.
Have a good night, all.
Night.